but Bacrot came up with a completely different move in this position.
Round 6 is done, and we picked up a game of Dmitry Andreikin and Etienne Bacrot as your rapid of a day. So Benjamin, what happened in this game?
Yeah, this game was absolutely crucial for the standings in Group A and to determine who'd move on to the semifinals. So Dmitry Andreikin was tied for the lead with Sam Shangland. And so Andreikin opened the game up with d4, d5 was played, knight f3, e6, c4. And here Bacrot captured the pawn on c4. So this is known as the Queen's Gambit accepted. Andreikin plays e3. This is a bit of a solid variation. White wants to take the pawn on c4, knight f6 by Bacrot, bishop takes c4, c5, castles, and a6. And this is really the starting position of the Queen's Gambit accepted. White has a lot of options here. b3 is a move, knight c3 is a move, rook e1, queen e2, a3 even. But Keti, Dmitry here came up with another move.
He played knight from b2 d2, and this is very interesting looking move. He just decided to develop the piece in this way, and after c takes d4 that Bacrot played, he decided to take the pawn on d4 with the knight rather than to have an isolated pawn, and he decided to have pieces in the center and try to be very active. Here Bacrot decided to develop the bishop, so he played bishop c5 and attacked the knight on d4 right away. Andreikin played knight 4 to b3, and after this bishop would draw back on e7, and here we had also bishop e2. A little bit weird maneuvering from both sides, but all these moves make sense here, because after bishop e2, Andreikin wanted to not to fall for b5 on a tempo, and he wanted to be ready for b5. And shall we see what happened after that move?
Yeah, so he played bishop e2, anticipating for the move b5, which is actually what Bacrot played here. And now he played the move a4, putting pressure on this pawn on a4. So Bacrot took an a4, and Andreikin recaptured the pawn. So here the position looks fairly equal, right? The structure is symmetrical, but white has a little bit of pressure towards his pawn on a6. Black castled, and here the move knight c4 by Andreikin. Bishop d7 was played, hitting the rook. So Dmitry dropped the rook back to a1, and Bacrot played knight to c6. So I mean, around here the position felt like it was pretty even, right, Keti?
Yes, it seemed to be pretty even. And once again, I have to announce this award that in the move that Andreikin played knight b2 d2. Once again, this move looks a little bit weird, that the piece is bit farther and withdraws back, but seems like here Andreikin's idea was to play b3 and then to develop the bishop on b2 or bishop on a3. On the other hand, white can also look for some moves like e4 and try to just get more space advantage in the center in the king side. So after knight d5, as Bacrot responded, here we have move knight f3. So Andreikin tries to get this knight from b3 to f3 on the king side and look for some squares like e5 central squares. Then we had knight jumping on b4 from c6. And this is also very nicely placed knights b4 and d5. These knights are controlling a lot of squares. And let's see what happened after this move.
Right, so here Andreikin played bishop d2, putting some pressure on the knight on b4. Bacrot played queen to b8, knight ce5, hitting the bishop on d7. So Bacrot played bishop b5. The players traded here. Black took with the queen, knight at d4, hitting the queen on b5. So the queen dropped back to b7, queen to b3. And once again, I mean, position is completely symmetrical. So you might be wondering, like, okay, why do you guys choose this one? For your rapid recap, but stay tuned. So queen c7 was played, hitting the knight on e5, knight df3 to defend, rook fb8. So black is x-raying the queen on b3, rook fc1, hitting the queen. So the queen moved to d6, and here Andreikin played the move e4, hitting the knight on d5. So I mean, a normal move would be here like knight f6. But Bacrot came up with a completely different move in this position.
Yes, he came up with the move knight c6, which looked quite natural as the queen on b3 is under attack, and this knight also on the other hand attacks the knight on e5. So we were considering here some moves like to take this knight by the rook or to get this queen out of the pin, and out of nowhere so the move queen takes a rook, queen sacrifice. And we were really impressed by this sacrifice, which happened in this game. And for this reason, we choose this game to be the best game of the day. So Benjamin, what happens after queen sacrifice?
Yeah, queen takes b8 came in as an absolute shocker. But here's where the game becomes extremely complicated. So Black has three ways of capturing the queen. He can take with the rook, the knight, and the queen. Let's see what happens. So if Black takes with the rook, now we take the knight on c6 with our rook. We hit the queen. Let's say the queen drops back. And now we take on d5. And here White has a rook and two knights for the queen, which is more than enough. So White has a winning advantage. So what else can Black do? If he takes with the queen, now we take the knight with our knight, hit the queen. Let's say this queen moves. Let's say it takes a pawn over here. And once again, we take the knight. We have a rook and two knights for the queen. So once again, White has a winning material advantage. So Bacrot played the only move in the position. He played knight takes b8, but now came rook c8 check. You have to block with the bishop, and White takes this knight on d5. So here we see that White has a rook and a knight for the queen, which is generally not enough. However, if we take a close look at the position, we see that this bishop on f8 is pinned, right? It cannot move because that would put the king in check, and also this knight on b8 is pinned because that would hang the rook on a8. So White has a lot of compensation here. We expected the move queen takes d5 to guard that rook on a8, but Keti, Bacrot here came up with a different move.
Yeah, he captured the d5 pawn with the pawn, which is not the best move, and you can see the bar evaluation bar goes all the way up for White's advantage. For sure, his idea was to free the rook from a8 and to play rook a7, and somewhere else is also knight is pinned, and Bacrot wanted to keep queen on d6 to guard the knight. However, after this move, White has a lot of ideas here. White can play moves like rook c1, rook e1, knight d3. We even see rook a4 with bishop b4 idea. So there is plenty of moves in here which keeps White's advantage on the board. Rook a2 c1 was played here. This is a very good move as it comes into the game and supports another rook on the back rank. And after f6, we have seen knight withdrawing on going to c6 square. We were considering to see knight at d3, the best move here, as bishop b4 is still a threat and bishop f4 is another move here. So White could keep this advantage on the board, but we saw rather weird move here on the in the game.
Right, so Andreikin played knight at c6, putting pressure on this knight at b8 and threatening to go bishop b4. Here we thought it was probably best for Bacrot to go knight takes c6. You give back the exchange, but at least here your pieces come more into the game. White can take on a8, but once again, at least Black's pieces are active. But instead of that, he played the move a5, so his pieces stayed tied up. And here is where Andreikin probably made quite a serious mistake. He played the move rook to d8. It looks like a nice move. It's hitting the queen, but Bacrot came up with a very strong queen at c7. And now all of a sudden, White's pieces are a little bit tied up, right? Because this knight always has to keep guarding the rook. And how are you going to increase the pressure here? So Andreikin played knight fd4, trying to bring another piece into the game. But Bacrot played queen at b7. Now he's guarding the rook on a8, so he's ready to move in this knight. Andreikin captured a pawn on a5, but now Bacrot took on b2, hitting the bishop on d2 and the knight on d4. And here's where Andreikin played knight db3, but now he is defending all of his pieces on the queen side, but they're also, stuck defending each other, right? They cannot move. So Bacrot came up with a very good move here. He played king to f7, making sure that now his bishop can move again. And Andreikin played bishop f4, hitting the knight on b8, which looks difficult to defend, but here Bacrot came up with a very strong move.
Yeah, after king f7, now bishop is free to move away and start to annoy white's knight, which are stuck on the side of the board. They are guarding each other, but they are also just stuck on each other. So here Bacrot's move is bishop on b4, and his strat is straightforward to capture a5 knight. And white cannot really avoid that. White give another check on c7, and now as king is for advanced, king can go on g6, and this king is safe there. So after king g6, Andreikin started to push more and played rook to g8. His threat now is really serious. He wants to play g4 and then to capture on g7, and that's how he's creating checkmate net. And at this point, both players had a time problem on the clock, and seems like rook g8 was quite smart decision. Even though the position is still losing for Andreikin, seems like this was the practical decision from his side.
In the rook g8, now the position becomes extremely tricky. We see indeed that both players are very low on time. Andreikin had only 45 seconds on the clock, Bacrot 4 minutes. So he took on a5, and Andreikin recaptured. And here probably Bacrot should have played a move like king f5 to at least step out of the mating net before capturing this knight. But he took the knight at a5, and now white played the very strong g4. So with the move g4, he's staying with the f5 and h5 squares for the king. He wants to take here, which would be checkmate. In this position, black probably should have played the move f5 to defend this pawn on g7. The position remains extremely complicated because white can capture this knight on b8. If you capture with your queen, white has rook c6 check and remains up a piece. So black would have to play something like queen f6, but once again, white has a lot of tricks here against the king. But instead of that, Bacrot played the move knight to d7. Dmitry took the knight, and he was probably banking on the move queen b1 check. However, white just goes king to g2, and this threat is still alive. He played queen e4 check, but now white just played king to g3. The players have reached the 40th move, but Keti, is there still defense in this position?
Unfortunately, no. After this decision not to play f5 and guard g7 pawn, now it is impossible to guard g7. And also, there is a check. There are several checks on the board, but none of the checks are very dangerous or any dangerous for white. As after rook a3, now the king goes on h4. King has this square to hide there, and there is one last check now on the board to play rook h3 to sacrifice and hope for a draw list, but white will take this rook, and after another check white will come back on h4, and this is hopeless position for black's king. And yeah, at this point when they got the time increment on the clock, Bacrot had to resign, as next move rook takes on g7 is a checkmate. So this was quite beautiful game played by both sides, and we had also several sacrifices, blunders, and for sure heartbreaks too. But this was your rapid recap of a day, and we hope you liked it, and do let us know in the comments if you liked this game from round 6 at Grand Prix.
Indeed, yeah, a crucial game in Group A. And we see here the bracket. Dmitry Andreikin, after this win, moves on to the semifinals against the winner of Group B, which is Anish Giri. And in the other semifinal, we have Richard Rapport against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave.